Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Lattice podcast, where I, Tom Randall, will be your host to all things training, climbing performance related, and other stuff. I'll be breaking down the details, tips, and tricks of many of the best climbers out there and how they operate. And in turn, I hope that you get something really useful from it. That's kind of the philosophy of how we're working as a coaching setup at Lattice, and we genuinely enjoy doing it. Today, I'm going to be interviewing someone who's very well known on the UK climbing scene, even, dare I say it, infamous. His top end numbers speak for themselves, multiple 9As in various countries, including link-ups of V13s, V13s, 14s, a repeat of the Wheel of Life in the Grampians, and actually some pretty hard trad climbing as well. What's more interesting though is his incredibly focused and somewhat unusual approach to training and performance. I consider him a real expert in energy system training, kneebaring and dieting, if that's any kind of combo. So welcome to our very own UK Mr. Barrows.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
How you doing, Alex? All right?
I'm good.
Thank you very much for taking some time out of your schedule, and I know you've been at work today, so you probably are missing a dead hanging session from this.
No, it's alright, I was resting. I'm tapering for trip, so it's alright, I was resting anyway.
Ever the strategist, so that's really good. So when I was planning my initial podcast that I was going to do, I have to say you were one of the very kind of top of my wish list people, and the main reason for that is that as I've known you for, it must be 10, 15 years or so. It's going to be a decent amount of time.
Yeah, 10 years or something.
You've always stood out to me as one of the people that's really good at breaking down climbing and performance and finding your own strategy to improving your level.
Yeah, I think relentlessly, boringly analytical, I think is a good way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some people would see it that way. And I guess to a lot of people who see some of the stuff that you write on maybe the internet and perhaps previously on climbing forums, because I know you frequented those dark corridors, is you're, I'd say, relatively outspoken about your approach within climbing. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. So it's partly just because if I'm posting on a forum, it's because I'm not outside climbing, which means I'm probably in a bad mood. So when I'm an idiot on a forum, it's probably not because I dislike you. It's just because I'm in a bad mood when I'm posting a response to something someone said.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so we've got to sort of sit back and reflect on it and not get too wound up about it.
Yeah, don't get wound up by stuff I post on the internet.
Okay. So
I don't mean it.
Right, okay, yeah. So would you say that your... Actually, the first question I'm going to ask you is, would you say that your grades and the stuff that you've done in the last 5 years or so means that you feel that your opinion and your somewhat outspokenness sometimes is more valid because you have been through that process and you've got to where you've gone?
I guess it depends on the subject matter. But if it's about training or that kind of hard routes, then I guess so, yeah. I think if you've got a big block of experience behind you of trying to get better and experimenting with things and gradually, slowly getting better, I think you have probably more to say than people who are only a few years into that journey. Yeah. Or I'd back myself more than I'd back them anyway. Okay. Maybe it's just my public school arrogance though as well.
So how long have you been climbing at that 9A, V13, V14 standard now? It seems a while.
I don't know, maybe 3-4 years, something like that.
Okay, and how long have you been climbing for?
Since I was about 17, so about 14 years.
Okay, so not the longest amount of time compared to other people that have climbed at that same kind of standard who are our, I suppose, similar age group. A lot of people have started climbing back down in the junior competition years.
Yeah, so I started in sixth form and I was not very good at first. So I started as a trad climber I started because I wanted to be a mountaineer, and then I went to the Alps, hit myself in the face with an ice axe, knocked a tooth out, and realised that I was definitely a rock climber and not a mountaineer. And yeah, I didn't start very good, and I started off mostly trad climbing, and then just gradually moved towards sport climbing and towards bouldering and towards training, and it's been a sort of slow but steady process rather than I started climbing and then suddenly got really good.
Okay, so to give everyone a bit of an idea, and as I was saying to you earlier, I think it's really easy for people to see really great climbers now and see these big numbers like 9A and assume that they were always at that kind of grade. How long did it take you to get to, for example, the kind of mid-7s in sport climbing grade and that equivalent of trad climbing of E6 or so?
I'd have to look at my logbook to know for sure, but maybe sort of 3 years or something to get up into that sort of zone, sort of E4s, E5s, maybe mid-7 red points. I remember at first I got better reasonably quickly, and then for quite a while I'd get better at a grade a year. So I think from maybe E4 to E6, it was like an extra year to get to E5, and an extra year to get to E6, and then I started doing more sport climbing, and then it would be an extra year to go from 7C plus to 8A, and then a year to go from 8A to 8A plus, and then a year to go from 8A plus to 8B, and occasionally there'd be a little bit more of a jump, and occasionally there'd be a bit less of a jump. But for quite a while it was sort of a grade a year.
Right, okay, so you weren't the jump from 7B plus to 8A in a year, then 8B plus in another year, like some of the people that we see at the top.
It was definitely a slow and steady. I had some times when I made bigger jumps. When I moved to Sheffield, because I had a year at Oxford when I started university and didn't like it there and transferred to Sheffield. And that year I moved to Sheffield, I had quite a big jump. I think I went from 7C red point to 8A plus red point. But mostly it's been a slow and steady wins the race. Yeah,
because I remember maybe the first time that I saw or climbed with you, and I was probably most aware of your online presence before I knew, because this outspoken level, and I had to say I was maybe a little bit surprised that I didn't think you were half as good at climbing as I was expecting.
Not as good at climbing as I thought I was.
Yeah, maybe it's okay for me to say this as a friend. But it's been fascinating over the years seeing you progressively chip away at it and go steadily all the way through those grades, and get now to, and it's, this last 3 or 4 years, to numbers that most people just dream of not or think aren't possible.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember when we first met, so I don't know what level I was climbing at when you thought I was surprisingly bad.
It's about 2005.
Okay, so that was pretty early on then.
Yeah.
So it probably was pretty bad. So that was just the public school arrogance of me mouthing off on the internet then. But I remember when it was the end of my year in Oxford, and I remember that summer I went to Paracellas and I couldn't do any of the problems on the edge of the cave, like the 7Bs and all that sort of stuff. And then however many years later, 7 or 8 years later or something, I was there doing pilgrimage. And I think it's just a slow and steady, and you don't think, I think unless you're one of the wonder kids, you don't think you'll ever be able to get that good. And my lifetime goal has basically always been about 2 grades harder than I can climb. So when I did my first 8A, I thought, oh, well, maybe 8B would be doable one day with a siege, if you get the right route, if you train really hard, etc, etc. Because if you've done 8A, 8A plus seems a bit too doable to be a sort of full lifetime goal. And until recently, it's always been, oh, well, then you maybe do 8B and you think, oh, well, maybe 8C could be doable one day, but you can never climb 8C plus. 8C plus is way too hard, like only the pros do that kind of stuff. And then maybe you climb 8C and you think, oh, maybe 9A would be doable one day, but you'd never be able to climb 9A plus. And then maybe you climb a 9A and you think, oh, maybe 9A plus would be, and now there's sort of less and less. Maybe now it's only one grade harder than a climb that's a lifetime goal. But I think if you stick with it, and you stick with being obsessed by it, and taking a boring approach to trying to be good, then I think you can surprise yourself. But it takes time. You occasionally see people on the forums say things like, I've been stuck at a plateau for 6 months, like, I don't think I can ever get better. And you're like, well, get stuck at a plateau for 5 years, then come back, and then we'll have a conversation about whether you genuinely can't get better or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. So would you see a plateau of 6 months or a year as being a big issue? Because for me, I've definitely been stuck for that amount of time in the past, and it's not a big deal.
No, I don't think it's... I mean, I guess it depends. If you've just started rock climbing, and you go rock climbing 3 times a week for the first year of your climbing, and you don't get any better, that sounds weird, and sounds like something's probably... if you start climbing and you climb 5+, and you go climbing 3 times a week for a year, and you still climb 5+, that would surprise me. And you'd kind of you'd wonder why something hadn't changed. But if you've been climbing for a while, like now, if I plateau for a year of you that's doing all right, as long as it didn't go backward, as long as something got better in that year, maybe I got a little bit stronger fingers, but overall I didn't get better or something. That's standard.
What originally got you into training?
Well, so originally it was just because I figured that if I was going to have to go inside, I might as well make the most of my time. So if I had to go inside, if it was raining or I didn't have a partner to go climbing with, I figured if I was going to go indoors for 3 hours, I might as well do the thing that would get me better as quickly as possible, and that would allow me to go and do the trad route. Back then it was trad routes that I wanted to do next summer or whatever. And then gradually, it's another sort of slowly, gradual thing. So at first, training was reading Gresh's articles on Planet Fear, back when that used to exist.
Yeah,
and training would be, we'd drive from Oxford to the West Way, and we'd do loads of routes to get really tired, and then we'd go and do some bouldering, and we'd do everything in totally the wrong order, and we didn't have a clue. And then once upon a time I learned, maybe I should do my bouldering before I do my routes, okay? And then maybe the next year you learn, maybe circuits are a good way to train fitness, because actually just doing one route and falling off halfway up and then belaying your mate kind of isn't as good as doing some circuits. And, maybe I should time the rests on my circuits. And then each year I'd get like a little bit more serious and a little bit more into it.
It's been very gradual in the training.
Yeah. So
as well.
I think, and at first I didn't really understand periodising. So I remember training for a trip to El Chorro, where I thought, right, I've got 5 months until my trip, so I'm going to do power endurance circuits 2 or 3 times a week, every week for 5 months, and get really pumped. And then you'd be surprised, I'm not that much stronger, and I'm not actually that much fitter than I was. Maybe I should have been doing something different. And then I remember it changed quite a bit. I remember when you gave me a lot of knowledge on the sort of aero cap and cap approach to training.
That must have been around 2010, 2011 or so?
Yeah, probably 2011. I think it was after I'd just been I took a long trip in Europe after I finished my undergrad, which was 2010, 2011, so it's probably when I came back from that, so it would have been like the end of 2011, and that's when I started getting more into training and thinking more, and that's when I sort of got more into it and wrote the little PDF. I think that was a year or 2 after that, once I'd sort of experimented. And I remember at first I experimented and was playing around with some of that stuff and got really good gains for a year or so, and thought, right, I've got this freaking sussed. I'm going to be a full-time climber climbing 9B in no time. And then the gains get a bit slower, and you have to start playing with things to make them a bit different, and you have to start experimenting. And
so what do you typically see as being the kind of fastest gains that people get when they do their... Because I've met a lot of people who've done structured training over the years, and for me it's and either never tried it, done 1 year or 2 years. That's kind of the typical people I work with, and there's a certain kind of sweet spot, isn't there? That first year where you skyrocket.
Yeah, I think if you've not done much structured stuff before, and especially if you have a really obvious weakness, so if you're strong but you suck at endurance, or if you're fit but you always play to that strength and you suck at strength training and you suck at bouldering, those types of people can get really, really good gains from switching to being a bit more thoughtful and a bit more structured. But sometimes people think too hard and too structured as well. Like when you have someone who's not been climbing for that long and they're worrying about the subtlety. Well, I did 4 reps instead of 5 reps, and my ANCAP circuit was 35 seconds long and it should have taken 45 seconds. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if you got roughly the right feeling and you tried hard and you got better at climbing, like, most of the time, either leave the subtleties to the person making your plan, or if you're making a plan, the biggest thing to worry about is doing it and not the, oh, should I hang for 5 seconds or should I hang for 8 seconds? Because 90% of the time it doesn't matter. Like
100%, I couldn't agree on this more, because I think the male species are particularly bad for it, that we get really obsessed in on the detail, and often you meet these male climbers who are very analytical, quite often good engineers or have some sort of science background or that's involved in their career, and they want to know every single bit of detail, how it all fits in, how they juggle it, and they create the best possible response. But whilst doing that, they then completely forget the whole thing of, I should rest pretty regularly, I should be really consistent, and I should complete the plan and stick with it for more than 8 weeks. And that's
get good at rock climbing is the other thing. People love tinkering around the edges and think, oh, my project's on undercuts, so what I need to do is something really specific to undercuts, like lift some weights, and that's going to be the difference between me doing my project and not doing my project. And they forget about the obvious, I want to get better at undercuts. Maybe I should climb some problems on undercuts. And kind of the obvious stuff, and making sure that the core of what you're doing is right, and worry about the tinkering once the core is perfect and you've still not sent your project, then do all the little tinkering around the edge.
Yeah, it's a really good point you have there about the not just doing exercises to do with undercuts, but also putting in a decent amount of work on problems of that style, because I'm essentially the victim of my own strategy in that way with crack climbing, because I put so much time into climbing a lot of crack boulder problems and trying all sorts of different sequences, very high specificity, not just 2-finger dead hangs, for example. And so my boulder grade, and consequently my root grade in that style, is much, much higher compared to other stuff, because I was so focused in that particular area. But I think if I'd just done 2-finger dead hanging, I'd still be very mediocre at finger crack climbing, for example.
I think you've got to strike a balance. And I flip-flop a bit between thinking people are too obsessed with tweaking things and training plans and forget about getting good at climbing rocks. And then the next day I'll wake up and think, oh yeah, the only reason why I got good at rock climbing is because I was analytical and I did my training session instead of going outside and all that sort of stuff. But I think you've got to strike that balance between getting good at climbing things and doing the thing that will make you physiologically better, stronger, fitter, whatever.
Yeah, in the end it comes down to a rounded approach, really.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. And working out what the key is for you. So if you're someone, someone like Ted, for those who know Ted, Ted's very good at rock climbing.
So I'm just going to stop you a second. So Ted, for anyone who doesn't know, he's a British, can we call him a British limestone specialist?
Yeah.
Very good on...
Very strong on the crimp.
Yeah, small holds, and he's done a lot in that kind of high 8s range and mid 8s range in that particular style.
But he broke his ankle, or busted his ankle earlier in the year, and had to... He's someone who normally very much goes to the crag at every opportunity, gets on rock every opportunity, so he's really good at rock climbing, but then he broke himself and he had to focus on training, and then he went and sent his project, Just Do It, in America, that he'd been trying for a while. So if you're someone like him, maybe you think, oh, maybe a bit more training is actually good. Whereas for a gym rat who goes to the wall all the time and has climbed 30 routes in their life and decides they want to do an HC plus, like they don't need to worry about dead hanging and campusing. They need to go and do some rock climbing and learn to climb routes well.
Yeah.
So working out, and most people, it's not easy like that because you're somewhere in the middle, and maybe on certain styles you need to do more climbing, but on certain styles the limiting factor isn't your ability to climb that type of rock or that type of route. It is your strength or your fitness. So you've definitely got to make a balance between all those things.
So, in that kind of same vein, do you think it was for you still a very balanced approach that took you from, and I'm going to say there's a good chunk of our climbing population now who are really into sport climbing, who are climbing in that high 513s, low 514s, also 8A to 8B, and then that group will really start to see the 8C to 9A and the high 514s range just being totally unattainable. For you, was there an important thing which allowed you to move from that bracket into the next bracket?
I think it was just more of the same. It was more of the slowly, a little bit more serious with the training, a little bit more thoughtful about what I was doing, and time, just allowing time to get better at climbing and get stronger. And I mean, my fingers aren't that strong for the level of stuff that I want to do, and they don't seem to. I've had periods where they've got stronger a bit quicker, but nowadays it's just slowly each year you maybe get a little bit stronger.
It sounds boring to most people listening,
it's pretty boring. It's pretty, it's a little bit of boring, being anal about tactics, making sure you're well prepped for your trips. I've probably got more boring between climbing 8A and climbing 9A. I used to go out drinking more and sort of talk to people more when I was at 8A. I'll put everyone off trying to climb hard. But yeah, I'm probably more boring than I was. Maybe I've got less boring recently. Now I've got married and stuff. Maybe I'll get less boring than I used to be.
This is your chance, Alex, to break out.
But no, I don't think there was any magic. I mean, I guess one thing was thinking about what I was doing outside and how that impacted on my training as well. So instead of just initially I was thinking, oh right, well I need to make the most of my time inside, so if I have to be inside on Tuesday I'll do something useful. Whereas nowadays I might think, oh well, I need to do X, Y and Z training in the week that I want to do, and I'll pick what I do outside as part of what I'm doing with my training. So if I'm just trying to get strong, I won't let myself go endurance climbing outdoors. I'll go bouldering, even if I'd rather go endurance climbing. And I think some people get into the habit of thinking, oh well, I've got my free day and my training is on Saturday, so I'll do whatever I want, and then I'll do my training on the other days. Whereas I normally think, well, every day that you're going climbing is a training day. So if I'm trying to get strong, then my outdoor day on Saturday is going bouldering, and my training day on Tuesday is doing max dead hangs or whatever. And I think thinking in that way, where every day you do something, you're trying to get better at rock climbing. I guess it's pretty boring. But
it's a little window of opportunity, and it's something that I spend a lot of time trying to remind people of, is that it's this, with athletic development, or whatever word you want to put to it, is that it's consistency of approach over years and years and years that really wins out.
Yeah.
There aren't these kind of secret magic pills that turn you from 8A to 8B plus. It's so, and it sounds so boring, but it's actually very hard to carry out, because I think people listen to what you do and go, oh, is that all you have to do? But I can assure you, doing what you've done is freaking hard.
Yeah, you've got to do it you've got to do it every day, every week, every month, every year, for a decade or whatever. And it's easy to get, I think most people get sidetracked by focusing on work or focusing on going out partying or things like that. And you can get away with if you're really talented, you can get away with that and still climb hard, although you won't climb to your potential. So you might get some people who can go out partying and drink loads and smash in loads of drugs, and then 2 days later they'll go and climb 9A. But for most people, they can't do that. And for the person who's doing that, if they put their mind to it, they could go and climb 9B. They just decided that it's not worth it for them. But I think if you want to actually get near your potential, you've just got to be a bit relentlessly boring towards it.
Yeah. And it doesn't catch headlines, and it doesn't look very good on Instagram, that kind of stuff. But that's the truth.
No, it's all anyone posts on Instagram. It's like black and white fingerboarding photo.
Certain types of people. I hope you don't catch too many of me doing that.
My Instagram is just full of black and white fingerboarding photo. Well, nowadays no one even fingerboards, they just do handstands or like acro yoga or things like that.
That's true. So, talking about strategy and crag strategy here, and that very methodical approach that I always see that you take is, when the last Spanish trip that I was at the same location as you was in Santa Linya.
Oh yeah, that was years ago.
There's another trip actually. It was me, you and Pete, and we were on a 9A, something like Ciudad del Dios.
Oh yeah, that was the trip when I did Eravea, and me and Will came up to Santa Linya for a day afterwards because I wanted to go and play on stuff.
And I watched you climbing, and one thing that fascinated me, and I hadn't seen you do it before, is I couldn't believe the strategy you had for not wasting any energy whilst dogging routes.
Oh yeah.
How do you do that?
It's a total pain for the belay normally. A lot of people will try sections and fall off again and again, when you could just clip into the bottom drawer and like aid to the higher drawer and put the rope in and work out where the holes are and all that kind of stuff. I tend to think there's a time and a place for trying really hard above a bolt and taking a big fall and that kind of stuff, and it's not when you're dogging and trying to work out moves.
Yeah, but it was even from the point of view that, so I think it was around the third or fourth clip, if it had been me, and I'm not half as strategic as you are in terms of dogging routes and working them, I know I would have just pulled on one of the holes and kind of just made a slap for the drawer and caught it somehow, put my feet back on and then clipped it. But you very definitely got the clip stick, you clipped in just the right length, and you made sure you were comfortable, and then you clipped that next drawer, and then you pulled up without pulling on the rope very much either. You got your B layer to do most of the work pulling you up, and it really just stood out as me as going, wow, I've just seen Alex save himself a couple of % of energy there, a couple here, and then I started to dawn on me that actually when you're working something, you're saving way more than people appreciate because you're doing it in lots of small increments. It just fascinated me.
So it's interesting because it's not something that I even think about that much, stuff like that, I think. Like, you think about trying not to waste energy, but it's so, I guess maybe it's just because I've done it for a lot of years now, so I don't think about it that much. But I do often see people wasting loads of energy on or when someone falls off a route and they're going to have another go that day, and they don't think, normally I would think, all right, well, either I'll come down if I don't need to work it, or if I need to work something, I'll go back up, work out if I did something wrong on the move. Do I need to work the top? No, okay, it's a bit easier, I won't bother. And sometimes you'll see people, they'll have their go, they'll fall off, they'll work the moves they needed to work, realise, oh, I put my foot wrong, okay, yeah, I've got it sussed for next time, and then they'll go and link the top 20 metres of moderately difficult climbing that they're not going to fall off on red point, and then come down. And you just think, well, that was freaking dumb. Like, you just wasted loads of energy, and now you're going to be ruined for your next go. And you could have just come down and you knew you weren't going to fall off the top of it anyway, or you didn't need, things like that.
So you're quite calculated about only using the energy on sections if it's the limiting factor. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. And if it's it's different if it's the end of a day, and you're going to go home and you want to get trashed, repping the top of a route again and again and again, because that's good tactics, because you need to have it dialed. But if you're going to have another go, or if you want to work the bottom crux and you need to be fresh for it or something, then I'd never wreck myself. I think there's a time and basically, if you think that if it feels like what you're doing is atactical, it probably is, and you shouldn't be doing it. And if it feels like what you're doing is really boring, it's probably spot on.
I think I'm starting to think that we maybe should just call this the boring
podcast. Yeah,
and that's the whole truth behind it all. Okay, so going.
It doesn't have to. I mean, again, I think it's a time and a place. So you be really tactical, have your goes on the route, and then it gets to the end of the day, and then you can smash yourself doing links and that kind of stuff. So you can still do that fun stuff, but not if you're going to come back the next day and have another red point. Save it for when it makes sense.
Yeah.
And repping sections is something I do a lot of in terms of being tactical on routes as well. Like, work out where the moves you're going to fall on are, and go and do those moves again and again and again and again and again, and make sure it's properly wired.
So even if you perceive them as being really fatiguing and it might mess up that day, you'd rather put more time into that section to create the greatest efficiency on it, because you've got a long-term view that in 3 days' time you might be just the right position to red point it. You might as well do it now.
It depends on how close you are. If you're going to have loads of if you think you're on red point and you're about to do it, then you don't need to do that. Wait till, if you've not done it at the end of the day, then maybe go and do it. But if you're working something because you're going to red point it the next weekend, then definitely pick the key section. Like, work out, well, which sections am I going to fall off? Oh, right, I'm going to fall off the top crux, and everything else doesn't. I mean, everything else matters because you've got to not be tired when you get to the top crux. But repping moves again, making sure you've got it properly wired makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Another really boring thing, and most
Standard.
people really find this boring, especially the boulderers, and we know this is of use to them still to some extent. And you know what I'm going to say is endurance training, and in particular is what people term arc training. And I know you and I have a little bit of a difference in how we approach this.
Yeah, so I think you don't like the lower intensity arc stuff, and even maybe not the continuous aero cap stuff quite as much.
It's the really
real
long stuff.
Sustained intensity.
Because you do 45 minutes, is it, or something like that?
Sometimes, depends on. Normally nowadays, if I'm doing that sort of length, I'll stack blocks of harder aero cap with arc as well. So often it'd be partly because I'm running out of time and I need to go home and go to bed because I've got to get up the next day for work or whatever. But I might do 20 minutes of sort of split intensity continuity straight into 10 minutes of arcing almost as a rest, straight into 20 minutes of continuous intensity continuity, and then have a 5-minute rest, do 20 minutes of arc and go home or something like that.
So what you're doing is essentially you're staying in an aerobic zone, but you're oscillating the intensity of it.
Yeah,
so
even if I was just arcing for 40 minutes, there'd still be harder bits and easier bits, just because I'd get bored and start messing around on the wall. But I think it's worth... Anecdotally, I've seen people get fitter doing 40-minute blocks of arc and that kind of stuff, and I've seen me get fitter doing that. And I think it depends a bit on what you're training for. So often, if I go on a trip, I'm going to go and try an on-site 40-metre routes. So I might be climbing for half an hour to an hour. So I feel like if none of my training is longer than 10, 15 minutes in a row, 20 minutes in a row, I can feel totally unprepared for going and spending an hour completely demolishing myself. So it's that sort of training over distance, like training under and over distance. So whereas if all you care about is red pointing 20-metre routes and it's only going to take you 5 minutes, well then 15 minutes kind of is over distance by quite a long way. So maybe the arc stuff is a bit less important. But certainly if you want to do long stuff and on-sighting, I think it's useful, even if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think the road that I've gone down in the last few years is because I work with so many different sort of varieties of types of climber with different demands of time and the goals they have, that I've learned to be a lot more flexible about that approach, because I used to take, quite a similar approach to you do, where you kind of just hammer it and go pretty hard. And I respond really well to that type of training. I can get way fitter than I ever expect doing that stuff. But I was really seeing that with the person that was working 5 days a week, was in the office 9 till 5, and maybe also only had half a day at the weekend and 2 days on the wall, is it was taking quite a lot of their energy and their time into doing that, so they weren't putting the quality in other areas that were becoming more useful.
Yeah, I think you have to.
It's compromise.
You have to prioritise. So if you can only get 3 training sessions in a week and they can only be an hour and a half, then you kind of have to accept that you're not going to be able to do all the training that you want to do, and you're going to have to work out what you can fit in. But at that point, you should probably quit your job, or do what Dave Mack would say, and quit your job, quit your life, move next to a wall, all that sort of stuff.
I was just about to quote Dave as well then.
Yeah.
Although one person
but he's kind of right. Like, if you want to be good, that's the kind of thing you should do. And if you don't make any of those kinds of choices, then you won't be as good as you could be, and you probably, unless you're really lucky, won't be as good as you want to be. I live in Sheffield because of the rock climbing. That's why I moved to Sheffield, and because of the training. And if you're not choosing to live somewhere because of the climbing, and choosing not to have a job that's 7 in the morning till 9 at night for 6 days of the week, then you are sacrificing your climbing. And that's cool if it's what you want to do and you want to work that job because you really like that job, or because your goal in life is to buy a Ferrari or whatever. But if you want to be good at rock climbing, you might have to make career sacrifices or change where you live, or that kind of... people take the piss out of some of Dave's blogs or whatever for saying that kind of stuff. But it's basically true. Like, almost everyone who's good at rock climbing is really obsessed with rock climbing and makes loads of life choices around it. And you can still have a normal... I have to work 5 days a week and work 9 to 5 and now have a mortgage and a wife and all that kind of stuff. So you can still have a normal life and train loads and climb. Maybe not as hard as you want to, but
Because how many hours would you say you put into training a week with what's really quite a normal balance of 5 days a week normal work?
So my structure's a bit weird now, because my wife Ella gets up early some days of the week. So normally I train, Tuesdays I'll train for 2 hours before work, because we get up at 6. So I'll train for 2 hours, go to work, and then I'll train again for maybe 3 hours in the evening on Tuesday. And then Thursdays I'll do the same as that. So maybe there's between 4 to 5 hours a day on those 2 days, and then both days at the weekend I'll train or climb.
Yeah. And have you found that, because I've been through that same journey of structuring my training, is that as soon as I started having the flexibility in my life or maybe the discipline to be able to do split sessions, and I did work in the morning, which typically was the high intensity work, strength or power based, and then I did all my lower end work in the evening. Oh my goodness, it transformed my climbing. Yeah,
so I was really reluctant to have this new strategy of just climbing Tuesdays and Thursdays but in the week, but doing double sessions, because I always used to do Tuesday evening, Wednesday evening, Thursday evening, because I didn't want to get up at 6. And then I suddenly had to, and I realised, if I'm getting up at this time, I may as well make the most of it and train, especially because if I go to work and end up just working till 5 or something, I'm going to be more tired having got up that early. And then suddenly realised I really like it, and actually having... Because I do 4 sessions in the week now, because I do Tuesday morning and evening, Thursday morning and Thursday evening. So I kind of do more sessions than I did before, but I'm also fresher for the high quality ones, because now Tuesday morning and Thursday morning both follow a rest day, so they're really fresh, high quality strength sessions, whereas before only Tuesday was the day after a rest day. So I think that split way of doing it works really, really well. And if it's rainy on a weekend, I'd always rather do a split session if possible than do one big session. But it's a bit more faffy with life because you have to get up at 6 a.m. to train before work, or you have to go to the wall and then come home and then go back to the wall, however it is. And if you're getting up at 6, it means probably you either need a wall that has 24-hour access, like we've got the schoolroom in Sheffield, or you need to have fingerboards at home that you can train on and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I found the big thing that changed it was having a home setup. And yeah. I've got kids, and I really cannot complain in any way about, I don't have the facilities to do any training, because I've deliberately engineered it so that I can walk straight out of my bedroom at home and do some kind of training within, about 4 meters of my bed. There is no excuse.
Yeah.
It's only motivation which would ever hold me back.
Yeah, I think it works really well. So we don't have a board or anything, but we've got fingerboards and we've got TRX and we've got rings and stuff in our attic, and it means you could be too tired after work or something, but I guess maybe if you've got kids you wouldn't have time, but for most people, even if you've got a busy job, you can probably squeeze in an hour before work or an hour after work, or an hour before work and after work, even if you're working quite a long day. And you can do, it's not ideal, but you can do quite a lot with not much time if you really have to.
Yeah, it's not enjoyable.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it's better. I mean, it's better to work 3 days a week and have 2 days a week to just train all day, but
yeah, that's
kind of harder to come by.
Okay, so let's move from forearms to another extremely important part of the body for climbing, and one that you're very well known for. This is the infamous part within, especially the Sheffield UK scene, and that's kneebaring. And I think you originally got the reputation because a few years back, you found easier ways, or perhaps controversial ways, of doing some very hard, well-established classic problems, but you worked out a better way and a more efficient way of doing the knee bars. Is that right?
I think it was pilgrimage that made me Mr. Kneebar.
So that's the big link up in
Paracelsus Cave, which is a link, sort of 45, 50 move boulder problem link, climbing all the way from the back of the cave to the front. It's like the UK's version of Wheel of Life. So it's like the wheel, except ugly, chipped, and with way more goat poo. And occasionally human poo, depending on who's been in the cave.
Same sort of grade?
Seems easier than the wheel. It's probably 8C plus route, or 8B. Or if you do it Malk Smith did the first descent, and his way's probably solid, hard 9A, or 8B plus boulder. And I found quite a lot of knees on it. Knees for resting, knees for doing both of the cruxes, all that kind of stuff.
So what got you into the knee barring originally? Was it a needs must, or was it something that did you see someone doing something and went, oh, you got the pun?
Yeah.
There's so many puns around knee barring. Or was it someone who's inspired you in it? Because I'm always interested to see what someone goes, how they go down a route.
Because I sucked at knees at first. I remember going to Rodyar with Bob Hickish, who at this point had climbed in Europe. He's one of my friends. He'd climbed in Europe quite a lot at that point, and he was all right at knees. And he was so much better than me at knees, and I just sucked at them. I didn't get them. I'd never really used them. They didn't make sense. They hurt. They were horrible. And then I think I started using them a bit more when I took my trip to Europe after doing my undergraduate degree. And I think it was meeting people who used them. So meeting Spaniards and meeting Americans and being like, I have to put the knee in there because otherwise there's no rest. And with the knee, there's a no hands rest. And I gradually learned a little bit more and a little bit more. And then some Americans lent me a rubber knee pad. And I didn't really like rubber knee pad at first because it kind of feels like wearing armour a little bit. But I just gradually learned to like them more and more.
And was it a combination of the right equipment in with the technique? Because you must have been introduced to all these different types of knee barring materials, like the neoprene.
So, yeah, at first it was just neoprene, and then these Americans gave me a rubber one to use, and that definitely made everything less painful. So I got more into it, and I think it was just it was a gradual, started getting a bit more into knees, and then you suddenly realise there's loads of things where there are knee bars. And I think if you start climbing somewhere like Rifle, you realise this from day one, because everyone is gaffer taping knee pads to their legs, and everyone is good at knee barring, and all the routes would probably feel 3 grades harder if you didn't know how to knee bar, and if you didn't use knee bars. But the UK, I think, until maybe the last 5 years, was kind of a knee bar backwater. So no one had used these knee bars, because it wasn't like in America where everyone was used to using them. So no one had been looking for them. And then as soon as you start looking for them, you realise loads of things aren't as hard as you thought they were.
And do you think there's certain things which really changed the game for knee barring? Like you said about the gaffer taping, I only came across that in Spain for the first time, and I didn't even know you would do that.
Oh, so that I got taught, that I had to ask from Americans for the knowledge. When I realised there were loads of knees on pilgrimage, I basically emailed some American friends and said, right, I want the full beta, and they said, okay, shave your legs, spray on the pre-tape spray to stick the knee pad down, gaffer tape the knee pad on. So
spray the leg because it's easy to take tape off afterwards?
No, so the spray makes the tape come off less. So you spray under the pad. If you've got the slip-on pads, you spray your leg under the pad, and it's almost like spray glue, but it's not that gluey.
Oh, like carpet glue?
I don't know. It's pre-tape spray. I think it's designed for people like baseball people.
Okay.
To stop the glove sliding and that kind of stuff. So it's like a sports spray.
Yeah.
But if you spray that on and you spray it where you're going to tape, it stops the tape ripping off and stops it sliding, the pad sliding as much. Yeah. And then you gaffer like once or twice round the pad, once or twice round, half on the pad and half on your leg, and then once or twice round on your leg. But if you're using like the send pads with the straps, you don't really need to spray and gaffer. But they're kind of big and clunky, so they're good for bouldering or if you know you've got to wear one. But if you're just going on site and you don't even know if there's any knee bars, then the lightweight slip-on ones with a bit of gaffer is the way to go.
And is it pretty key how tight you do that on your leg? Because I'm always in this quandary of, can I actually move my leg, or will it fall out of the knee bar when I'm on it? And
I've never not been able to move my leg. If you've got the slip-on ones, they're pretty lightweight and flexy, so you don't even realise you're wearing them once you're a few bolts in. And even with the chunky ones, the buckle might sort of hurt the back of your knee a little bit and give you a little cut or a bruise, but I've never found it too obstructive. Generally, as soon as I start climbing, I forget that I'm wearing it.
And it's always with shorts, is that right?
Well, yeah, some people use it over trousers. I always have my luminous green shorts. Be like Jerry, but weaker and with more knee bars, with more shaving legs and gaffer tape.
And so once you got the technique down and the strategy with how to apply the knee bar or the knee pad and do that correctly, was it then a case of just practicing a lot, or did you do some training in with that? Because we know there's a few training.
So I've tried specifically. So I do a bunch of upside down sit-ups, knee barring behind canvas boards and stuff, but it's a really big knee bar, so I don't think it doesn't really train you for the subtleties of knee barring.
Have you tried it single knee bar sit-upping?
Yeah, it's really hard.
It's desperate, isn't it? I've done a bit of that.
And I did earlier this year. I tried lifting, basically taking an Olympic bar and stacking like 180 kilos on it or something, and basically sitting down with the bar on my legs and doing calf raises, because I couldn't stand up and do calf raises because I didn't have a calf raise machine like in the gym, and I couldn't lift the bar to have the bar on my shoulders. So I would just sit there and basically raise my calves with the bar sat on my knees on a pad, because it hurt too much if you didn't have a pad on. I'm not convinced that actually made me any better at knee barring. This was inspired by Andre's podcast where he said it's all about having strong calves.
Yeah, I remember that.
But I think mostly it's about technique, and you learn it by doing it.
Yeah. And
people... So, I mean, some knee bars are leg length specific. So if your leg's too long or your leg's too short, you just can't use it. But it's like heel hooks. I suck at heel hooks, but I just suck at them because I've not done them enough. And I think most people who suck at knee bars because they've not done them that much. And you just learn it. And the better you get, the more you spot them. So it's like a virtuous circle. The better you get, the more you realise that they actually help. The more you use them, the better you become at them, and that kind of stuff. And now I've lost track of the amount of things where kneebaring has helped.
I think I found exactly the same. I've been through probably an identical pathway, but with jamming.
Yeah.
And you realise to start with that you have this hugely, this path that's so fast in terms of learning all the technique, and then you start to get into the equipment a little bit. But ultimately it comes down to, there is an element of training in it, but when you get right to the kind of limit of what you think you can do physiologically, it's the ability to be able to find all of the jams or the knee bars, and then it's to relax within the last percentage of when you'll fall off and not freak out that actually you're quite close to falling off, so you're not overexerting the muscle to use it. And secondly is just this level of confidence you get.
I think
it works.
I think the relaxation doesn't matter as much if it's knee bars for moves, because it's unlike with jamming, you're not. Yeah, you might get a little bit pumped in your legs, but leg pump is usually only a factor if it's a rest, and then you have to relax, which is kind of hard because sometimes you have to accept that you might fall off. So I've fallen out of knee bars on red point and stuff, and that's mainly just accepting you're going to take your hands off and maybe the knee falls out, but it's worth it because to go that the knee doesn't fall out, you'll be really recovered.
I think this is a really important process for most people to do, is to fall out of knee bars, because too many people stay way too far inside their comfort margin, and they don't know where the limit is, and
don't realise that it's no hands because they don't dare take their hands off.
Yeah, and they're still desperately gripping onto some toofer and not truly relaxing in that arm.
And you learn, I think, even if you're okay at knees, you learn knees specifically. So there are definitely knees where at first I felt like it was a really bad scum and I could barely use it, and a few sessions later you're doing exactly the same moves, and now you can shake out on where the moves were still hard with the knee before, now you can shake out on every move because the knee feels really good. So you can learn the position really well, and you learn that it will stay, and you learn that you don't need to hold on as much as you think you did, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
makes a big difference.
It definitely.
And they're everywhere. There's so many things now. It's basically standard. I go to a problem, I can't do it, I find a knee bar, I do it. Normally have to downgrade it a little bit, but
I'd like to say that I did that with everything with jamming, but it's amazing how many things that now I've found subtle differences on ways in which you kind of torque a limb or even a foot sometimes en route, and I think I'm so pleased that I put 10 years of specialist effort into that thing, because that is definitely moved from a V8 move down to a V7, and that makes a difference when if it's at your limit on a crux and you're pumped.
Yeah, it's the difference between doing it and not doing it.
Yeah, for sure. And then the 10 years seem like it's worth it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it happens all the time. I mean, every route I've done this year, I think I've used a knee bar on pretty much. And some of them are a bad little scum that makes 5% of difference on a move, but it's worth having anyway. And some of them it's a total game changer, and it completely changes the problem. You've just got to look. A lot of the time, it's just looking and not getting sucked into, oh, well, that's the sequence because that's what everyone does for the sequence, so that's why I'm going to do it, and just looking and thinking, oh, well, I can do the normal way. Oh, but actually, there's a groove there. Maybe I can get, oh, right, yeah, there is a knee scum. And maybe it doesn't work. Half the time it's a red herring. There's so many times when I've found a knees and thought, yes, this is amazing. I've just rinsed the crap. Oh, wait, I'm stuck. Like, you can't release the knee, or you end up wrong-handed or something. So it doesn't always work. And sometimes you do waste time. I remember being at a bouldering crag once, spending ages spinning around on knees, and after an hour of spinning around in a hole trying to work something out, my mate sat down next to me and was like, what the hell are you doing? Just put your foot on and pull up and grab the hold. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, you do it that way. You don't use any knees, there's no tricks, you just pull. But the times when you don't, you waste a bit of time on some stuff, but other times you'll turn a problem from something you could never do to something you can lap.
And it's amazing being in that process, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I've been through that same journey where you have this light bulb moment where something was totally desperate or impossible, and then you suddenly can do it, or you can lap it, and then you think, I want to do this again and again, and then you, or at least I have, is I've gone, well, what happens if I even improve that skill set even further? I'll be able to do this way more than I ever did, and it's like that virtuous circle.
Yeah, it's like Ned Feely with his heels. He's so good with his heels, and there's so many problems that he's done with. Finds it easy because he puts the heel on and basically rests on the crux move and that kind of stuff. And I think if you had someone who was like Ned with heels, but also, I don't know how good Ned is with knees, but was Dave Graham-esque with knees and had all the tricks in the book, they could probably climb some really hard stuff while being really weak.
Yeah, it would be surprising what you could do. And I mean, that's one of the things that comes up often when we do assessments is if we work with someone who's a real specialist, often their numbers look really unusual in assessments. You think, how is that person so unfit or weak or whatever it might be for the grade? And it's because they've gone to the nth degree in one very niche area, and so it's
amazing in one style.
Yeah, it's amazing to see it.
Yeah,
and it probably says that most people, if they really went after that, they could also get a lot further than they think they can.
But then the downside is if you want to be good at everything, you can't spend your whole time just knee barring or just heel hooking, because you've got to. I guess you've got to choose what you want to be good at. If you just want to climb one hard thing in your style, then it doesn't matter. But if you want to go to any crag and onsite hard, then you've got to train avoiding using your strengths as well. But I tend to think that's something you can do in your indoor sessions, and outdoors is for getting good at rock climbing.
Yeah.
I always say to some of the Rob Napier who sets at the Foundry, when I cheat one of his problems by using a different sequence from what was supposed to be set, like I didn't go training to get shit at rock climbing. So if you need to train your weaknesses, like if you want to train front on, set a problem that makes you climb front on. Don't climb a twisty problem with really, really bad technique, because you just learn to climb badly. And people would say that with knees as well. I remember loads of people saying, if you're going bouldering to get strong, why are you using the knees? But I'm not just, if I go bouldering outside, I go bouldering to get strong for route climbing, but I go bouldering to get good for route climbing as well. And if you don't, if you deliberately eliminate the knees all the time, then when you end up halfway around the world in Hollow Mountain Cave, and you don't know how to use knees that well, you're stuffed because you don't have to learn while you're there. Or, when you get to the top of your hard onsite and you suddenly have to bust out some knees to save yourself from falling off, you're not going to be able to learn it when you're there. So I tend to think, work your weaknesses, like training sessions are there to work your weaknesses indoors, but don't do it too artificially. So if you need to get good at something, set something that forces you to get good at it. Don't just use a bad sequence or use bad technique or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's a trap that some people fall into, especially if they climb on boards a lot. They'll say, the board rule is there's no toe hooks and there's no heel hooks and there's no matching and stuff. Well, if there's no toe hooks and heel hooks and matching, just set a problem where you can't use toe hooks and can't use heel hooks and you can't match. Don't take a problem that's a really easy heel hook problem and climb it like a retard.
Hey, it keeps people busy on Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever way they're kind of, or in the pub bantering with each other about crazy things. I think that will never change. That's
no.
Standard.
And I'll still always get shit when I toe hook at the schoolroom or
of course you will. But you love us for it.
Yeah.
So another maybe quite controversial thing, but different from toe hooks and knee bars, is an area which I've actually really liked how open and also relatively outspoken you are on this. And this is on the subject of dieting. And it's one that I really feel like a lot of climbers are, whether they're professionals, amateurs or coaches, are very, very quiet on this subject area. People feel it's like a delicate thing to talk about.
I think I get told off at the crag when I make jokes about having seasonal anorexia and all that kind of stuff. I think people get scared about, I guess some people get scared about saying something that upsets people, or what if sponsors think it's bad, or that kind of stuff. But I think it's better, and you were saying this earlier when we were talking before the recording, I think it is better to talk about diet, because it does make a big difference. And occasionally I have a pet hate, I have loads of pet hates, but one of my pet hates is when you get articles on the internet from people saying, oh, diet doesn't matter, you know, I got really light and it didn't make me happy, and then I put some weight on and I climbed just as well. Like 90% of the time that doesn't happen. Like if you get light, you climb harder. And I think if you just try and trick kids by having people write articles that say, oh, don't diet because it's not worth it and it won't actually make you better. Like, kids aren't stupid, and you're not even kids, you know, 25-year-olds who want to get better at rock climbing aren't stupid. They see people dieting and they hear stories of Rustam sharing an apple after training and then passing out because he's so hungry, and they've realised that, oh, well, people are dieting, so I'm going to try dieting. So I think if you talk about it sensibly, it's better. And I don't think that being like full-on anorexic the whole time is good. It's good for your climbing, basically.
Well, it's a really tough compromise, isn't it? Because any of us who are operating at the top end or working with people who are trying to get to improving their climbing, we're all very aware of this power to weight ratio element of climbing. It's a body weight sport, and it really does affect performance. But there's this really fine line between too much, too little. But then mixed in with it all, it gets very hazy, because once you start to tread, it's a bit like overtraining as well. Yeah. It's a fine line between being very, very performance driven and very, very unhealthy habits, particularly if it has long-term repercussions.
Yeah, I think that's why I don't try and be light the whole time as well. So normally I'll be heavy when I don't want to be as good, and then I'll lose a bunch of weight and go on a trip or try a project or something. And I think if you try to be light forever, you just get sucked into a sort of downward spiral where there's nowhere to go. And then if you've been light for ages, well, that's a big hit, you know. So I sometimes over 12 stone when I'm in heavy mode, and then I'm under 11 stone when I'm in light mode. So if I was in light mode for a couple of years, that's a big hit to take when you go back to heavy mode. And I think people sometimes get sucked in. They get light, they get way better, and then think, oh, well, I need to stay light. I can't get heavy again because I wasn't as good when I was heavy. And I think sometimes you just have to say, well, I'm going to get light, I'm going to send my project. But actually, if I try and stay light for the next 4 years and send all my projects, it's not going to be good for me because I'm probably going to get ill. You know, it's not going to be good for your health. It's probably not good for your climbing because... I've seen it with a lot of people who get thin and stay too thin. You lose a lot of power, and you know, testosterone goes down if you have too low body fat for too long and that kind of stuff. So you're going to struggle to get strong. So I think a little bit of seasonal anorexia probably never hurt too many people. But I don't.
Alex said that with a smile on his face. He is joking, really. It means seasonally light.
Yeah, seasonally light.
Because what sort of body fat do you think that you get to when you're light? Because I think, like me, you've had yourself tested, haven't you?
Yeah, I got tested and it said it was 3%, but I don't believe that.
Right, crikey.
So I just think it's wrong because
was that a
DEXA to be hospitalised?
DEXA scan?
Or was that calipers? It was at Sheffield Hallam with the electric stuff.
It's like a bioelectrical impedance.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't trust them to work because, you know, what if you had more salt? What if you had less salt? I've never looked into the science, but I'm sceptical, immediately sceptical when it says 3%, and I'm definitely not.
Yeah, there's certainly a level of error in it.
There's pretty low at the moment.
Yeah, because for me, I find that, so I'm like you, I'm quite seasonal on it, and I try and be, again, as open as I can about it and talking to people, because I vary at my kind of training heavier weight at 72 kilos and then at 68 when I'm light, and I kind of have that seasonal fluctuation, and if I want to climb something really hard, I'm just not going to do it at 72.
Yeah.
But I climb well at 68, and I know that beyond that it starts to get very uncomfortable, there's too many repercussions, and it's crossing a certain line. But I've learned that over the years of cycling in and out of where that balance lies and how it fits with me. So it's like a steady, slow process.
Personal as well. Like I think some people it makes a big difference for, and others it doesn't. And it depends on who, if you're. I think people who are naturally strong-fingered but lack a bit of burl, you're probably not gonna, especially if they want to do something short and powerful or climb in font or something, they're not going to gain that much from dieting. Whereas if you're going to go and climb a 50-metre endurance crimp route and finger strength is your weakness, then you're probably going to have to diet to do something that's that hard for you.
What do you find you use to... Because there'll be plenty of people that will be listening to this and they'll be thinking, well, I don't want to go that extreme. I don't want to be getting down to 5%, 10% body fat. I want to cut down from 20% down to 15, for example. And they'll be saying, or be thinking to themselves, you know what? I just don't enjoy it. It's really unpleasant. I don't like it. Do you suffer the same thing? Yeah,
dieting sucks. But it's just one of those trade-offs, isn't it? And plenty of people it's not worth it for. If you enjoy training but you don't enjoy dieting, and you don't really care that much whether on your trip you climb AA or you climb AA plus, because it doesn't matter to you, then just don't diet. And it doesn't, train hard because you enjoy training, climb as much as you can because you enjoy climbing, and don't worry about the dieting. But if you want that extra little boost, then you just have to take a bit of pain. Or maybe not pain. Maybe that's a bit too, if it really, really hurts, then you probably dieted a bit too hard. I normally try and lose like a pound a week if I'm in diet mode. And I do it in I've sort of dieted cyclically through the years for a decade probably, on off. So I've learnt my body and I know myself quite well. So I basically take an approach of eat healthy, be a bit hungry, go to bed a little bit hungry. And that works for me, and I can kind of modulate myself to roughly a pound a week weight loss without tracking calories and all that kind of stuff. And I know roughly how hungry I need to be, and I'll be a bit more climbing days I still eat quite a lot, and resting days I eat quite a lot less. And you've got to try and get your nutrient timing right. If you're going to train in the morning, don't only eat a big meal. If you're going to train in the evening, don't eat 2,000 calories for breakfast and then have no calories left to eat in the evening when you're going to go training.
I've certainly noticed over the years that you're quite selective about making sure that you get the right nutrients. I think it was a trip maybe where I went to Spain with you, and you had all sorts of extra things like cod liver oil.
Oh yeah, I take my stock of pills away with me. Yeah, I'm pretty take. Normally
Made a difference?
I don't know if it makes any. So I have no idea if any of it makes any difference, but I'm scared enough that it does work that I have to keep taking it. So I take glutamine in the morning and not in the evening anymore. That probably doesn't do anything. I might stop taking it. Take beta-alanine for 6 weeks in the run up to endurance trips normally.
Yeah, decent evidence behind that.
Have a protein shake, or some BCAAs sort of during or after training. Have carbs before, during and after training. I'll normally try and stack my carbs sort of before, during and after training, and have fewer of them during the day. So if I was going to train in the evening, for most of the day I'd just eat salad, and then I'd have porridge, go training, have a banana while I was training, and then come home and have food afterwards or something like that.
And do you think that the whole open dialogue, discussing it and keeping it in the, I suppose I'd class it as being in the open amongst your friends and your climbing partners, is a good thing? Because as we said a little bit earlier, there's a line which you've got to be careful not to cross if you want to stay long-term healthy with it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think
it's a tough subject.
I think if you talk about it, it makes it easier for people to warn you as well. So last year, before I went to Spain, I got the lightest I'd ever been, and I had 2 people say to me, just like be a little bit careful because you look like you're maybe going in the wrong direction here. And I think if you never talk about that kind of stuff, people may be going to be a bit more reluctant to say, hold up, watch out. Whereas people are used, those people are used to me talking about this kind of stuff. So I think they feel able to say, look, this is something you think about, so maybe think about backing off a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, and I don't think I think I have pretty weird eating sometimes, and I've not always got a healthy relationship with food, but I don't, I've never got to the point where I've felt like it's an issue for me in terms of like having an eating disorder or something. So maybe if you actually do have one, you'd listen to me and think I was a freaking moron.
I think whatever way you see it, it's really good to be able to talk about it and be open and discuss it, because I have this conversation comes up a lot with people that I work with, and it's so much more obvious that when you work with a client, people are very, very open about it in terms of their questions. But when it starts to cross the line where I have a little bit more concern about things, it suddenly becomes a subject which is off the table. And that to me kind of categorises that fine line where it was open
when it goes off the table is when you get worried.
Exactly, yeah. And that's why I think this conversation is, and I hope that people who listen to this find it perhaps, like a positive and a good thing that we talk about this amongst me and you, because we both use it. Yeah. We both do that same strategy, but we're happy to talk about it.
And I think it's dumb like I was saying earlier, I think it's dumb to pretend that people don't diet and that people don't get to potentially slightly, pushing it with their weights. But I think you've got to be careful with what you're doing and not screw yourself over. And it depends on your personality as well. Like if you're the sort of person who's prone to obsession, to needing to be in control, all that kind of stuff, then maybe try and stay away from dieting too much. And if you're the sort of person who's pretty chill about that kind of stuff, then maybe you can. I think I'm generally pretty chilled about that stuff, so I think I can probably be a little bit disordered in my eating for periods at a time, because I know that as soon as I come back from my trip, I'll just go back into eating mode. And it might, maybe it's bad for me in the long run. I've wondered this before, because the more years I've done this and dieted for a trip and then put some back on and then dieted for a trip and then put some back on, the more I've ended up a bit out of control, where I struggle to be in the middle zone. So I kind of find it easy to be dieting. It's like it sucks, but it's easy mentally. I kind of find it easy mentally to be in putting weight on mode, because I freaking love going to Sainsbury's and buying a 4-pack of granola squares. But just being normal and staying the same weight for a year, that's the kind of thing I actually find quite hard.
I just want to say thanks so much for coming and doing this podcast and talking about lots of controversial or difficult subjects. I know kneebars.
Controversy. We barely touched on controversy.
Yeah, you've been quite controlled today, haven't you?
Yeah, we can be more controversial if we need to.
We'll save that one for the next one, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll do a late night version. Drunk dialing.
Extreme version.
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks so much for it. And to anyone listening, get in touch with Alex, send him a million emails.